Hi everybody. We're going to talk tonight about cutting out portraits and pasting them into other images. So I've got my masked image here. It's one of my masks, and I want to put this in a more interesting setting. So I took the modeled photo up against the white wall, as I recommend that you do if you're going to be cutting the portrait out. And I'm going to put it into this image of the Pisgah crater in California. So what we need to do is, first of all, I do recommend, if you know you're going to cut the portrait out, shoot the image against a white or an off-white, or at the very least a solid color background. Of course, you know that green screens work really well, but you don't always have that available. And so sometimes just a solid color wall with very even lighting can do the trick. So I set my studio lights up. I took the photo with as even light as possible, and my wall in the background is not completely white and the lighting is not completely even, but it gives us something to work with. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do, I want to help out the cutting process. I'm going to go over to my tools on the left hand side here. As you can see, I'm going to select the Dodge tool. That looks like the magnifying glass. Incidentally, if you cannot find the Dodge tool, check underneath the burn tool. It's possible that that is being displayed. Any tools that have the small triangle in the corner have tools underneath them. And so if you see the burn tool or you see the sponge tool, then that is where the Dodge tool is going to be. So select that Dodge tool, go up to the top, enlarge the size of the brush, keep the hardness low, set your range to midtones or highlights, set your exposure to, well, you can pull it up pretty high. We're going to test it out. If it's too high, you can always scale that back a little bit. But this is all up in here where I'm moving my mouse. All what I'm talking about is in the menu bar up at the top. So any tool that you select can be adjusted up here at the top. So when I selected the Dodge tool, I can go up here, so change the size, keep the hardness low, and the range and the highlights and the exposure, all those things that I were talking about. Okay, so that's the nice thing about Photoshop. So now I'm going in with sort of a light touch because I don't want to overlighten my image. And I'm just going in. Let's actually pull that exposure down a little bit. I'm a little bit worried about bleaching out the mask figure image, which I don't want to do. It's really just all about helping out the cutting tool, which we're going to do next. Especially if you've got a darker background, I think this will actually cut out pretty well. But just for the sake of showing you how this works, I'm going in and dodging an area that I may not ordinarily dodge. Got to be very careful though, because if I zoom in, I can see that it's starting to overly highlight the edge of my image there, and I don't want to overdo that. For the very dark areas down here, I'm going to have to pull the exposure up. Okay. And if you're getting really into the nitty-gritty, you can pull the size of the brush down and go in, and that way you're not going to be as much at risk for overly bleaching the edge of your image or your hair. Hair is a very big danger zone. Okay, and again, I don't want to spend too much time because we're on a limited time frame here for this demo. But you can see very easily how this works, and you can go around the edge and really help out the selection tool. Okay, so let's test out the selection tool right now, see how this is going to work. We can always come back and dodge more if we need to. So the Magic Wand tool is the tool that you want. Make sure it's not the Quick Selection tool or the Object Selection tool. Those have their place, but for today, we want to focus on the good old Magic Wand tool. Okay, that's going to be the fourth click down on your toolbox. Okay, so we're clicking in here, and we're seeing that the Magic Wand tool grabs similar pixels. That's what it does. Okay, and if you go up to the bar at the top, we can see that the tolerance is set to 32. So the higher the tolerance, the more pixels it's going to grab. So I just changed that to 60, and it grabbed a lot more. Okay, so this is working pretty well. And what you want to do is once you get that first selection that looks like it's working, you're not clipping into your image too much, you can hold Shift down. And as I hold Shift down, it's adding to the selection. Okay, if you can look at my cursor there, and I click Shift down, see how it's adding the plus sign to my Magic Wand? Okay, that means that I'm ready to add to my selection. You can also see it shifting up here in the menu bar at the top. Incidentally, you also have a subtract from selection that can be very helpful. But I'm just going to, overdid it. Okay, so you got to know when to rein it in. But this did a very good job of going around the edge. Didn't get everything perfectly. Again, I'm going into my image too much. But if I zoom in around the edge of my image, I can see that it did a very nice job of grabbing all of those pixels. And most importantly, it's not clipping into my image at all, which is the danger zone, because you can always erase what's around the image that doesn't get selected, but you can't fix what gets cut out. Okay, so what are we going to do now? Because we've got all this area down here, we've got this area here, but my selection tool is not really working very well for that. Okay, see, it's actually just cutting into my image in a way that we don't want. Okay, so let me show you a helpful tool to clean that up and fix it. We're going to actually combine selection tools now. So if you go to the left to the bar and select the lasso tool, okay, so this is another selection tool. We're going to first of all click that little button that I hovered around earlier, add to selection, and see how that just lets me easily lasso, literally clicking, holding, and dragging, and I'm lassoing around the areas that the selection did not grab. Okay, I'm going to go down here at the bottom, and I'm just going to delicately go around that edge. I'm grabbing all those selection areas. We had a little problem area here in the corner as well. We're going to grab that. We do have a little bit of a problem area with the cloth here. You can decide if you just want to cut that out, or you can go in with a fine-tuned Magic Wand tool and grab those little elements. I'm not going to worry too much about it, so I'm actually just going to clip that right off. So that's not going to be selected now. Okay, as I zoom in, I can actually see several more areas that need to be grabbed. Sometimes you do want to use the navigator. And that's what I'm doing, by the way. I'm over here on the navigator. I'm using that sliding bar to zoom in and around my image. And that's going to give me a real fine-tuned look at the image and what needs to continue to be cut out. Okay, so if you do happen to miss some of these little pixels here and there, which I can see that I'm grabbing, don't worry about it, because once you cut this out, you can always go in with an eraser tool later and clean that up. The eraser tool is a very helpful tool that works really well, really well. So I'm not going to stress too much about these elements. As I've said a couple times, the main goal is to simply not cut into the image. That's what we don't want to do. If that does happen, I'm going to do it on purpose and cut some of your image out. You can always go to your History tab, which is right above your Navigator tab. I can click that and then jump back on my individual steps. Every time I make a click, it records it on the history tab. Okay, so you can jump back and undo those steps. And as you see me scroll back, you can see all those little lassos back into my magic wand. So it's a very, very helpful thing to do. Okay, I'm seeing more and more of these little elements that I need to get. I'm going to make myself stop, and we're going to go ahead and missed this down here too. We're going to cut out my yellow masked figure here. We're going to put it in our landscape. So if I go to edit cut, at this point it's going to cut the background out, right? But that's not what we actually want. We want to cut the figure out, not the background. So we're going to go to select, and then we're going to scroll down to select inverse. And that simply does as it says. It's going to invert that selection. Now my masked figure is selected and the background is not selected. Okay, I have a selection feather at 6 pixels. So if you've got really harsh edges that you want to be a little bit more smoother, you can always go in, if you can see where my cursor's moving around up there on the menu bar. That feather is just simply how sharp of an edge the selection is going to give you. Okay, got to be careful with it because you don't want it to look overly sharp and Photoshoppy, but at the same time you don't want it to be too soft and sort of fake and airbrushed looking. So it's sort of a fine line there. So we're going to go to edit, we're going to cut. All right, Mr. Fox is being, I guess he's a fox, I'm not sure what animal he is. He's being cut out. Now we're going to go to edit. We selected our other image, by the way. We're going to go to edit, paste, and voila, this works pretty well. We're just going to fine tune it. I'm going to move him around the image. And he's a little bit large, so I'm going to grab the edge of the image with my cursor, and I'm going to resize him and get him to where I think it looks best and how much of the image. I'm not really worried about clipping the bottom because I sort of prefer the figure to be a little bit larger within this image. Okay, I'm going to go back to my move tool. That sets the guy in place. Now I can zoom in and I can tell that it looks pretty good. Okay, so when I cut and paste, I've automatically created a layer. And over here on my layers tab, you can see that now when I pop that out, that's over here where my mouse is hovering, I have a background layer and I have my figure. Okay, you can click the little visibility icon, looks like a little eyeball. You can click that and it hides the layer. Of course, you can also do the same thing with the background, and we can see, well, we can take the background away so that we can see simply the figure. Okay, so my cutout worked out really well. One thing I did just happen to notice, when I selected my background, I can see a little residual line here on the edge. That's the sort of thing that you're going to want to do after you cut. Any pixels that show up that shouldn't be there, or any lines, now I'm going to go in with my eraser tool. That's somewhere around the middle. Select that interesting little looking shape, the eraser tool. I'm going to go in and just erase that out. And I'm on the wrong layer, so we're going to go to edit, undo eraser. I'm actually glad that happens because that lets me remind you, always pay attention to what layer you're on. So if you get what just happened to me and you're like, oh goodness, that's not what I meant to do. Okay, just take a step back, edit, undo, or go to your history tab, select the layer you need to be on, which in this case is the masked figure. Go with your eraser, and now that's what I meant to do. Just take out that little layer right there. All right. So now my figure is in the landscape that he needs to be in. The last step that I want to do is I want to integrate it a little bit more, make it a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to select my top layer. I'm going to go to image. I'm going to scroll to adjust, brightness and contrast. And just tweak those little settings until we get something that looks right. So to my eye, if I pull down the brightness, that looks a little bit better. It was a little bit washed out, and I may want to bump the contrast just a little bit. I'm going to go into the background layer. I'm going to do the same thing. There's no rules for this. It is literally what looks good to you. Okay? And you want the lighting to be somewhat even. And to me, pulling down the brightness on both of those couple clicks really help that. Another thing that you can do, I'm going to have to merge my layers to make this work. Another thing that you can do is add a photo filter. Photo filters are very helpful. They're sort of like the social media filters like Instagram. I find them to be a little more useful and a little more fine-tuned. So if you go up to the top of your image, we're going to go to, well, where is it actually? I just played with it a while ago. Let's see. Well, there's filter gallery. Okay, so it's actually going to be image, adjustments, and then photo filter. So yeah, that's where it is. My brain crossed the wires with the word filter. So it's image, adjustment, and photo filter. And then it just pops up some simple warming and cooling filters, as you can see here. It doesn't do much, but because you're shooting with two different color schemes with the background and the foreground, it's going to even that out a little bit more. I mean, you may think, I don't even see a big difference, but I think if I click that filter, you should be able to see how it's a little bit more warming, cooling, and you can go in and play around with an overall color tint. It's essentially, well, there you go, deep red really shows it off. And you can adjust the density as well. Really pop that out, make it look sci-fi-ish if you want to do that. One thing that it helps you do is just, give the overall image almost the effect that it would have if you had a literal filter on your DSLR camera. The screw-on filters that go on the front of your lens, sort of doing that. Now to my eye, I like the warming filter. I like the orange. Gives it that desert, high desert feel. I'm going to pull that up a little bit. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to crop it a little bit. I like the square. That's the crop tool, by the way. 5th tool down. I'm going to lock that one into place. My image looks pretty good. I'm going to go to File, Save As. I'm going to save it to my computer. Let's just put it to the desktop for now. Now you want to make sure that you go with a JPEG format and not your Photoshop file. That's going to give you a more user-friendly and accessible image if you're going to upload it to social media or to a website. I'm going to, you can retitle that whatever you want. Let's do mask desert figure. Just make sure the .jpg stays on at the end, because that can corrupt the file if that's not there. Okay, so we're going to click File, Progressive, large file always, highest quality, click OK, and that image is now going to be on the desktop for you to do whatever you want to with. All right, thank you. I hope that helps you get used to cutting and pasting. Have fun, and I can't wait to see what you come up with.